Notre Dame fans, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. It is Sunday night. Vince, that's Vince, by the way. Vince Adair, our football analyst at irishbreakdown.com. My name is Brian Driscoll. I'm the publisher. And Vince left. Apparently, he was upset that I did not intro him first, and so he left. But we are going to talk about the Notre Dame. I said you left because you were mad that I didn't introduce you right away. Vince is our football analyst at Irish Breakdown. I'm the publisher. And this is our Upon Further Review podcast. And we both are able to dive into the film. And what we like to do in this show is not just regurgitate the same things last night. Sometimes we will reemphasize, hey, I thought this last night, and I still feel that way, especially about controversial things or things that people may tend to disagree on, like my take on the defensive game plan. That's going to be something a lot of people don't agree with when we get to it. But then also offer some things that, and this is coming from a football coach's standpoint. When every game I've ever coached in that I can remember, there are things that I thought happened during the game, sometimes minor, sometimes kind of major, where you say, I felt one thing live, but then when I went back and watched it, I felt a different way because I realized, okay, they were doing something that we hadn't seen or something that we weren't prepared for, or they were doing something different. And you always have those kind of takes. And so that's what we like to do with this show. So Vince, let's dive into it. And I think big picture, nothing really changed from our stance, what the game meant. It was still a good win. Mm-hmm. When every weekend, here's the thing that I don't like. I'm frustrated that this team isn't better. Okay. I'm just going to say it. But I think that some people who are much more frustrated than I am, I feel like we have to take a step back and say, look at college football this year. When you're winning, it's a success. And yes, it's sloppy and things got to change. But there are things that definitely have to change for Notre Dame if they're going to keep winning out. But with the nature of college football in 2021, winning ultimately is the key. And so that's the big picture take for me. Now, what we're going to do is take the coaches' look at it and say, yes, it's great that they won, but to keep the winning ways going, they have to improve in some other areas. So let's dive first, Vince, into the offense. Yeah. You had a chance to kind of go through and break the game down a little bit more. Game plan wise, let's just kind of talk about just the overall strategy after breaking down the film, digesting it, thinking it through. Overall big picture, how did you feel about the manner in which Notre Dame went after attacking you in North Carolina last night?
Well, I think they kind of took a page out of the North Carolina playbook, to be honest with you, with as many RPOs as they ran, the obvious RPOs that they ran. Can
you explain that? Because you and I talked about that beforehand. When you say obvious RPOs, explain what you mean by that.
Well, and it's almost, I say obvious because a lot of times you see an RPO live and you can pick it out better than I can. But as I was watching the game and I was taking my notes as we were going, and when going back, it was like, oh yeah, there's an RPO. Oh, there's an RPO. Like it's very clear because if you watch the quarterback's face, right, his helmet, where he's looking as he's going to hand off the ball. Okay, that's number one. That's your number one tell. Okay, if he's not looking at the running back and he's looking at a read, okay, that's an obvious RPO situation. Okay. Also, your next tell, and which is what I was doing most of the time live, is I was watching the wide receivers. I was watching the outside. And so when it's a straight run, the wide receivers are blocking, right? If it is an RPO, they're running routes. And so if the wide receivers were running routes and they handed the ball off, ding, 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 it's an RPO, right? I mean, with very small margin for error, right? There were so many more opportunities where Jack Cohn specifically was running RPOs. And I also thought that there were many more times that not only was he running an RPO, but he was doing the P of the RPO a lot more, right?
Right.
That's why Styles got involved. That's why, Davis got involved, right? A lot of those.
One was with Buckner, right?
One was with Buckner, absolutely. But that's why they were hitting those screens and some of that short stuff on the outside. Those are RPOs, right? And the overhang man, the guy that was splitting the difference between the slot receiver and the end of the line of scrimmage, he did not play it well. And they took advantage of him. And I don't know if that's something that they saw on film or what,
It is. I would assume it is based on watching North Carolina's defense, which is a comment I made last night, Vince. I'm shocked that North Carolina's defense is as bad at defending RPOs as they are,
because they see it every day in practice.
Every day.
I mean,
it'd be like Navy's defense not knowing how to stop the triple option,
right? Because watching North Carolina,
they're as good as it
the week leading up to it.
Country.
Yeah, they clearly run RPOs. That's a staple in their offense, and it's clear and obvious, right? And so that they're doing that in practice.
They rank in my top 10 of effective RPO scheme, effectiveness, all that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And they don't have great personnel.
Right.
I mean, they don't.
And Notre Dame literally took a page out of their playbook, in my opinion, and they ran it right at them, and it was effective all night long. And so I appreciated that. And I think it's, they're not just mimicking, UNC, obviously, but that can highlight what their guys can do well. Okay. And it also masks what they don't do well. Okay. Right. And obviously I'm talking about the offensive line offensively. So I really liked it. I thought it was the most.
Which means what? Explain that. Cause I think I understand what you mean by that. But when you say what the offensive line does well and doesn't do well, explain what you mean by that.
Yeah. So the offensive line, and watching it back, last night we thought that, and we felt that their pass pro was pretty decent, right? I think you thought it was better than I thought live.
I thought it was really good.
Yeah, right. And I think you've come back to the pack just a little bit on that.
Quite a bit, actually. Yes.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
It was much better on the deeper drop backs.
Right.
But there was a lot of times in this game where they were like first play of the game.
Yeah.
There was in the first drive also, the 3rd and 6 to Kevin Austin.
Yep.
Notre Dame's line just let a dude run free. Just didn't touch him.
And that happened more often than
he got drilled as soon as he threw the ball. But he stuck in the pocket good. Man. This is something that he got hit a lot more last night than I realized.
Yes. That's exactly right.
And just, because once the ball's gone, like you, I kind of watch the secondary, and once the ball's gone, I'm looking at the routes and seeing where the ball's going. I'm not seeing Jack Cone get drilled in the face.
And he has gained some serious confidence. In the past.
He's
couple of games.
Comfortable, and then kind of back to the original thing, Vince. That's the thing that I found most heartening about last night and really the last 2 games. It is so clear that Jack Cone is 100% on board, and he feels like they're building around him finally.
Yes,
that's definitely something that
I was more impressed with Jack Cone watching the film back than I even was live. And I thought he had a good game. I did. I thought he had a good game. Okay. But he stood in and he stepped into a few throws and then just got,
drilled,
just smacked. Right.
Yeah.
And that, you don't do that if you're not confident in what you're doing and in the throws that you're making and things of that nature. So I
also think it shows that he's got more confidence in the line. Yeah. Because they have given him more time the last couple games. He's not looking for that. That's what he did the first couple games. If you remember, the first couple games of the year this year, he got hit a lot, but he had at least enough confidence in the line that he would stand in, not look for the hits.
It was almost like
the ball.
It's almost like it was like ignorant confidence. Like, he hasn't been behind that.
Hey, I know I'm going to get hit, but the timing of the off. And this is what we talked about. Like early in the year, they were pushing the tempo more. Florida State, he got hit several times. I think of the wheel route he threw on was it one of the first couple plays of the game against Toledo?
Okay.
Right. It was against Toledo. Threw a wheel route to Michael Mayer. Remember that one? And he got drilled. There's no way he saw the ball get caught, which I've joked before with you where, I said the best pass I ever threw in my college career, I didn't see. It was against Frostburg State. We're playing in Raven Stadium, and I throw the ball, and the guy just hits me under my chin. So I'm laying on my back. Our crowd's on that side. Their crowd's on that side. And I'm just kind of, which one's going to start yelling? And our crowd started yelling. So I was like, okay, he caught it. Cool. That's happened to Jack Cone several times this year, and it happened to him last night. That's okay, because that tells me even though he's getting hit, it's not rattling him, because he's confident enough in the line that they're going to give him protection and more often than not. And I think that's where I felt better about their pure dropbacks. Yeah. They were handling that. Their quick game and RPO protections, not RPO protections, play action protections, to me were a little bit shakier.
Shaky. Yeah, I agree.
Especially the quick game. So they're not handling those. So what North Carolina was doing, and this is something I didn't recognize as much watching live, North Carolina actually ran a lot more twists and stunts than I thought they did live. Now, a twist is essentially Right. Real quick one. So like this defensive lineman is going to go here and this guy's going to loop around him, or a defensive lineman is going to go here and the linebacker is going to come right behind him.
Right.
They
and
did
when it's
more
two
of
defensive
that.
linemen, it takes a little bit longer. So that's why I said delayed.
Yeah.
Because when he goes here and then he has to loop all the way around and come over, so it feels like it's delayed. And it's done that on
They were
purpose.
hitting them quick early, and it was getting they backed away from that later in the game.
Understand why?
Because Cone was just picking them apart.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like
because they had some free guys coming at him.
Yeah,
he was getting rid of the ball so fast it didn't make a difference. Yeah.
So I thought that was a positive. I thought the RPO thing, Vince, too. It's leaning into who you are. That's the most encouraging thing. One thing we talked about before the game was, and we have a couple super chats here, Vince. I want to get to Daniel Wade with the super sticker. Thank you very, very, very much for that, Daniel. I appreciate that. We also have one from Christ Built 1218 with a big super chat. I appreciate that very, very much. Want to get to you all before we dive too much further into this. Jim K with another super chat. Thank you, Jim. I love the way you guys break everything down for all of us. Keep up the great work, Brian and Vince. We will definitely do that.
Yes, we will.
Y'all are paying us to break down film and give you our thoughts. I mean, we would do it for free. But
and we were for a while.
I joke, but we appreciate it so much. Absolutely. And Dennis Rydell says, wasn't the offense too conservative in the first half last night? Styles needs to play more. That's the one I wanted to get to.
Yes,
that he just brought up.
That's a great segue. Yeah.
As I broke down the game, I actually don't think it was conservative. I did at the time. I don't think it was. I think the lack of downfield shots made me feel like it was too conservative when I watched it live. But when I went back and watched what North Carolina was doing, which is number one, playing a little bit tighter outside, but softer inside. They were just giving away the quick outs and those type of things. They were playing a lot of cover 2 to the field and at times to the boundary, which means they're taking over top. Basically, North Carolina by alignment was trying to say, we're not going to let you beat us deep. And so Notre Dame just said, fine, we're going to nickel and dime you and just move right down the field.
Right.
And that's part of the reason Jack Cohn scored in that long run. Now, you and I have debated and we have agreed to disagree about whether or not he should have thrown it to Michael Mayer. And the response you said was, well, he would have hit it for a first down. It doesn't go for a touchdown. A bad response would be, well, Jack Cohn scrambled for because you don't know that he's going to scramble for a touchdown.
Right.
You still, if the read is there, you throw the ball.
Right.
Right. But I still feel like the safety over top with the linebacker coming over, I didn't love that throw. As a quarterback, I don't know if I would have loved that throw. But the point is,
right,
that's an example of them playing off, taking away the deep shots, which opened up Jack Cohn on the 21-yard scramble.
Absolutely. Yeah, right.
And that's my point, is I felt like it was almost, if I were to say it was conservative, it would make me a bit hypocritical because I've always said, attack the weaknesses of what they're doing.
That's what they were allowing you to do.
Just like Notre Dame's defense did the same to Carolina, which we'll get to. I felt like Carolina was protecting against the deep ball a little bit more. I felt like Notre Dame did a good job of finding the soft spots, even little things like stacking Avery Davis and then releasing them both. And then Avery just goes finding soft spots. He hits a little 6-yard pass that turns into 20. I'll take that. Right. And what he was doing is he was giving his guys opportunities to catch and make plays. And sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. I mean, look, a 40-yard pass is a 40-yard pass, whether you throw a go route that the guy catches in stride or you throw an RPO to Lorenzo Styles that he takes for 40. Right. A 40-yard gain is a 40-yard gain.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like those were there more than the deep shots were there. And the other thing is Carolina, as we talked before the game, has big physical corners, and they used that to their advantage. Notre Dame picked on Don Chapman a little bit more when he was in the game, which I was happy to see. That they started kind of, hey, the starter, that's not Tony Grimes. Let's take advantage of that matchup. Where I would have liked to see them be more aggressive, even in the second half, was I felt there was more there over the middle that they could have gone to. They hit the seam to Mayer. They hit the deep cross to Styles. That's an area where I would like to see them be a little bit more aggressive. But overall, I didn't feel it was. So I felt they could have been more aggressive, but I don't think that equals too conservative, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I will say, and this kind of complements what you were saying or enforces what you were saying. They were running a lot of clear out routes and then bringing somebody underneath on the outside. And it was clear that to me, especially rewatching it, that they were very worried about those deep routes. And they would almost double team the guys that were going deep, which left those guys underneath wide open. And the linebackers weren't getting enough width, or that wasn't their responsibility, one of the two. And they were allowing a lot of those underneath throws, those quick outs, those slides, things of that nature. They were open all night long, and they were doing it from different formations, and they were doing it from some motion and some things like that. They were getting actually a little bit creative, but they were still hitting the same concept over and over. It felt like clear it out, get somebody underneath, and they hit that guy underneath all night long. And I agree with you. It's because North Carolina was so worried about that deep throw that they were allowing the underneath stuff.
Which I didn't understand because Notre Dame hasn't been real successful with that lately.
No, they haven't. I agree with that.
So if they were watching Toledo, Florida State film, then I would have understood that. But that's not an area where Notre Dame has been super, super strong lately. So
yeah,
Vince, let's talk about quarter. You had some thoughts on the quarterback rotation, the usage. I didn't mind it as much. I was fine with it. I can maybe nitpick a little bit, but you had some stronger opinions on that. Do you want to share kind of your thoughts on it?
There was one series that I didn't like specifically. There was a couple of them, but the one specifically after North Carolina scored to bring it to 27-31. They start the next series off, and they've got Buckner in the game, and then they have a false start, and then they bring Cone in. Right. And that felt a little disjointed. And then there was another series where they had Buckner in. Here it is. It's the fourth offensive series of the game. And it was in the first half. And it was right after North Carolina went to tie it at 10-10. Okay. Buckner comes in to first play. They're on the 25. It was a touchback, obviously. And I wrote, do not like this. Okay. They had Buckner in for the first play. They run the ball. And after that first play, and they didn't get much on it, right? They bring in Cone, and now he's in on second down. And I just that just felt disjointed to me, and I don't like that. It felt to me that the quarterback plan didn't feel as specific this week as it did last week. And I really liked it last week. I thought it flowed nicely, and I thought it was obvious when Buckner was going to come in. It just felt a little disjointed to me. Now, look, it worked, and I don't necessarily mind the changeup at times. But if you're going to bring Buckner in on first down of the first play of a drive, then leave him in for a little while. Like, don't bring in Cone and put him behind the 8 ball after first down isn't successful, because they give you 3 downs for a reason. You know what I mean? And now you've only given Cone 2. And to Cone's credit, he comes in and he hits Mayer for a first down on that particular drive. So I mean, it was a post to Mayer, but again, I just didn't like it. Right. So I want it to be more defined, Brian. That's where I really want, because I don't mind the 2 quarterback thing. I really don't. I think it works for them. They found something.
Well, it's something we've advocated for them doing since the summer. So I would hope that we would. Yeah. When we had our issue with it early in the season is the way they were doing it. It's like they would just bring, okay, Tyler, here's your series, and then Jack Cone could go 20 real life minutes without being on the football field. Right. And it's kind of like, what do you talk about during games all the time? Right. TV announcers, man, this long drive, boy, the offense has been on the field for a while. Well, they were doing that to Jack Cone and then to Tyler Buckner, both of them, and then saying, okay, now go run the offense. And to me, that didn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, it was rough. And I honestly, I just don't like the Buckner thing at the beginning of a series, right? I don't like the one play and then Cone comes back in if it's not successful. It
depends on the play. I mean, it depends on the play you want to go. The reason. Well, let me allow you to explain why you don't like that.
Yeah, I think it not necessarily that it breaks the rhythm, because I would be okay if you bring Buckner in on like a 3rd and 2, right? And then you bring Cone back in after he picks up the first down, like that kind of. I would be okay with that, unless you're trying to take a shot or whatever. But because that's a defined role. Okay, short yardage situation, we're bringing in Tyler. Cone knows it. here we go. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like that would be a defined role. I don't feel like the first play of a series and then you bring him out for the second play is a defined role. That's my biggest issue with it.
Right. For me, I think I don't mind it so much if there's a specific play you want to start with. My issue with is that I think it's harder to go tempo when you're rotating a quarterback. And if you know you're going to rotate a quarterback. Now, the other part of it too could be is they could have a potential, if this works for X, we're going to go with play 2. But if we don't get it, then we're going back to so like if you have a call on 1st and 10, right? And hey, if we get 5+ yards, we're going to go right. We're going to go tempo and we're going to run this with Tyler still in there. If it goes for less than 5 yards, we're going to then go to the next call for me is going back to our base and doing that. That could be part of it too, I think, but it makes it harder to get your tempo going. Like, what if the first play works? You want to hustle up and get lined up again, right? Well, if your plan is to just take Tyler out the next play. So that's what I would say is I would only dislike it if I knew that no matter what happened on that play that they were going to go to cone. I don't like it. If the result of that play would have been, okay, if it works, we're going to keep rolling. But if it doesn't, we're going to go to Jack. Because you know this, Vince. I mean, a lot of coordinators are going to script out. Like we talk about the pregame script. A lot of good coordinators will kind of do a semi-script for themselves on the next drive. Okay, I want to start off with this, this, and this.
Right.
But
because they're working on that while the team's on defense. You know what I mean?
Now,
they're like, okay, what was working? That kind of thing.
The difference is you don't sit down there with the offensive line and say, or the offense and say, okay, here's the 5 plays. You may say, hey, look, we're going to start with this. I'm thinking I want to attack this next series, and here's a couple things I'm thinking.
There's been times, and I know it's college, right? It's different than high school, but like there were times as a high school coordinator, I would talk to a trusted person, right? It could be one of my offensive linemen. It could be the quarterback. Hey, man, what did you like? Like, what's working right now? What do you guys like? And if it was an O lineman, of course, they would want to run the ball, which is fine. But like, what's working for you guys? What are you feeling? And then I would try to incorporate that. You know what I mean?
I'm pretty sure Tommy Reese does that with his quarterbacks.
I'm sure.
But the other thing is too is sometimes you're going to tell them what you like. Hey, this next series, I really want to go after number 4, right? So here's where my play calls are. Here's what I'm thinking. Yeah. If we do this, then I want to take this shot. One of the greatest, which I would encourage any fan to watch, is watch some of the NFL films of the Super Bowl 33, Broncos and Falcons. They've got this great segment where Denver's up 10-3. Falcons are going on a long drive. That whole time that they're on the sideline, Gary Kubiak and Mike Shanahan are looking at the plays and they're like, okay, Eugene Robinson's doing this. I think we can beat him with this, but how are we going to do it? And they spent this whole time coming up with that play. And then the Falcons went down. It was 10-6. The Falcons went down. Morton Anderson missed a field goal. They ran this bootleg post because Eugene Robinson, who had picked Elway off the year before in the Super Bowl playing for the Packers, was now at the Falcons, was biting hard on this certain move Rod Smith was doing. And so this whole time while the defense is on the field, they're scripting this play that they wanted to take a shot. And, of course, it goes for an 80-yard touchdown. Right? That's what happens in between series.
Right.
Now, at the NFL level, it's a little different because you're involving the Hall of Famer that's going to throw it a little bit more, maybe than you would Jack Cohn or Tyler Buckner or Drew Pine.
Fair enough.
That's what happens. And so you'll script it out. So I think sometimes that might be part of it too. And, hey, I really want to run this play to start the drive off with, but we only repped it with Tyler during the week of practice. It could be something like that too. So there could be circumstances where I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
But just overall, if it's just run the play and then bring them out, I don't love that.
Yeah.
Like you. I guess I'm just more willing to say.
And you may be right. And if that's the case, okay. Like I could get on board with that. It just, to me, it felt disjointed to somebody that's not on the headset. And I don't know what their game plan is there, obviously. But yeah, that's a good point.
And that should always be taken into context. So like when we talk about the touchdown that they gave up on the pump fake, the defense, we're going to talk about that. We think someone's responsible. There's a chance the coverage could have been something different and that person's not correct. The point is somebody missed it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So there's always room for that. Offensive line, Vince. Let's talk about the O-line.
Please.
So I was coming out of it I still feel like the offensive line is certainly improved. And I still feel good about the fact that I felt for 60 minutes in the run game, they kept a body on a body, and they didn't work their feet. Here's the thing. We've talked about they need to drive through contact, work their feet through contact. We saw that a little bit more last night, but a lot of it's just kind of pitter-patting. They're not actually getting movement. It's just kind of moving your feet, not driving your feet. And that's why I don't think they're getting any movement.
Yeah,
it's because they just kind of hit and then just kind of pick their feet up.
It's not a drive.
There's a okay. Here's the thing. Like, let's say you're trying to move a car. Okay, if you just put your hands on it and then just start like kind of jogging, you're not going to move the car.
Yeah,
you got to dig your feet in and drive off.
You got to get low. You got to get low, and you got to drive. Yeah,
same thing. We're not seeing that, but because they're moving their feet. And most of them are naturally athletic, talented players to begin with. They're playing, as we said 2 weeks ago. This is a stretch where the defenses they play are garbage. So you can get away with things against them that you couldn't get away with against Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
So they're not as necessarily as good as the numbers show. Partly because last night we saw one of the best running back performances I've ever seen from a Notre Dame running back, like ever.
Right.
Which I grew up in the 90s with Reggie Brooks and Jerome Bettis and Autry Denson, and in late 80s with Ricky Waters, and you know what I mean? I've seen some pretty good running backs in my day. And then there's older folks that have seen Vegas Ferguson and Alan Pinkett, right? I didn't see Alan Pinkett. I didn't see Vegas Ferguson. From me, it's 88 on. That was, to me, one of the 5 best individual game performances that I've seen from a Notre Dame running back. So that helped, but I still like the improvement. I think that the run game, they didn't have as many mistakes as they had in pass pro from an assignment correctness standpoint, right? I didn't think so. They moved their feet, kept a body on a body, and they let Kyron and Logan Diggs do their thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was key.
The effort was there, no question about it.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, if you get performances like you did from Kyron Williams, and I cannot expect him to do what he did last night every game. That's not possible.
The last 3 weeks, he's in a zone right now.
He's in a zone. There's no doubt about it. But if you have somebody that's even performing at 80% of what Kyron Williams did behind you, stalemates will work. I mean, and I'm not saying it's
It's also the nature of this game because they are running so much zone, and that's the thing is you're not opening a hole right here. It's not an A gap run. It's a
right. And Brian Kelly talked about it in the post game. They run duo where it's just double teams across the board.
Right.
Okay.
It's basically a zone play. It's their zone
that's
play.
Exactly what it is. That's exactly right. And they're getting better at those, by the way. And I agree with your comment from last night. They are getting better at that.
The timing was better, yeah.
But if they can just be average again, get those stalemates, the guy behind him is going to be doing pretty good.
Yeah.
I want to bring up, there's a super chat that I want to bring up in a second, but I also want to bring up this from Sawyer. He says, I listened to the game on the radio and the commentators on Sirius, and there's only one radio broadcast team, obviously, Burmeister and Ryan Harris.
Ryan Harris.
Mm-hmm. And they were acting like Kane Madden was having an amazing night. True. No. Not true, I will say. And Tommy Guns answered it. He goes, fact check, false, which I think is fantastic.
Pro Football Focus also had him ranked as the number 2 player. Here's the funny. You want to know why I don't take Pro Football Focus seriously? Oh my gosh. Kyron Williams was their 3rd ranked player for Notre Dame last night. Jack Cohn 1, Kane Madden 2, Kyron Williams.
Kane Madden 2.
3. Yeah.
And I will also say that Mike Tirico on the TV broadcast at one point, after Kane Madden had the false start, and then Patterson had the illegal snap.
Yeah, the snap.
He said, 2 of the I can't remember his exact words, but he's 2 of the most steady linemen that they have, making some early mistakes. And I'm like, well, if you're setting the bar down here,
Mike Tirico's not breaking down film.
No, he's not.
Mike Tirico's talking to and that's not a knock on Mike. That's not his job. That's Drew Brees' job.
Correct.
He's going with what the Notre Dame coaches tell him.
And Drew Brees isn't going to just knock a kid on the air either. Right. I mean, that's not really his gig.
So let's talk about some of the standouts, and let's talk about Kane Madden, because you and I are probably going to disagree a little bit again on him. But let me answer the question why I think people tend to over focus on Kane Madden, because Kane Madden is their strongest lineman. When he has a good block, it's much more noticeable. Whereas Andrew Kristofic's kind of just getting on a guy and it's just, getting in his way. He had a really nice block on an inside zone that Kyron cut right behind him, but they're not blowing people up.
No,
right?
They're not.
It's what happens in high school. I've said this before. If you go back and look at rankings, I'd be willing to bet that the offensive line is one of the positions where they miss the most.
Sure.
And I think one of the reasons for that is because they fall in love with these big kids that are just so much bigger and stronger than everybody else, and they have these really dominating blocks.
Yeah. Yep.
And they don't look at other things. And I think with Kane Madden, I think that there's one of two things happening with him. One is there's people that are like, to me with Pro Football Focus, they're just, whenever they can kind of, they don't want to admit that maybe they were wrong on something
that they missed,
so maybe that's it. I don't know. But I think people that kind of had a higher opinion of Kane Madden coming in are going to look at the things he does well, and when he has good moments, say, "Oh, see, really good job." The people that don't like Kane Madden, and I'm not pointing any fingers at anybody, are gonna sort of be a little bit hypercritical of him. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of just really evaluate it. And I felt last night my assessment was fair. I think he was really inconsistent in the first half. I think he settled in the second half, and after that no non-hold call, I thought he had probably his best half of football for a Notre Dame player last night in the second half. And I think the fourth quarter was a Kane Madden game in that you're playing power football and you're not asking him to move. You're asking him to come off and be physical. And he had some really impressive blocks. I mean,
there's no question.
He had a red zone block where he hit a guy and drove him, 6-7 yards into the end, not 6-7 yards into the end zone, but 6-7 yards ended up in the end zone. I thought he had some good blocks last night in the run game. I think his issues were more pass game related in picking up the twists and stunts.
Yes.
And then he stopped his feet a few too many times, got beat up the field, including the play where he should have got called for holding. But I don't think Kane Madden played a great game, but I also don't think he played a bad game. I think he had a solid game that had 6 or 7 very glaring mistakes. But overall,
and those are the ones that I remember.
Solid. Right.
Like those are the ones that jump out at me.
But that's my point, though, is I think you're being a little hypercritical of him.
I get that.
Because I think we're still both trying to figure out the absurdity of which the preseason hype around him was. And I think you're also kind of maybe taking some frustration out on that we have for Brian Kelly on Kane. I think maybe that's it. I'm not trying. But I don't think he was as bad as you think he was, and he definitely wasn't as good. And I'm not saying that what Ryan Harris said he was, because I love Ryan. I think Ryan does a great job. His analysis is really good. I didn't listen to it, so I don't know what he said. So I'm not going to speak on that. But I do know there are people that are acting as if he had a great game last night. He didn't have a great game last night, but he didn't have a bad game either. He was solid.
Sure.
Just has a little bit he has to clean up.
I'll give you that.
Opinion. What were your thoughts on his play?
Well, again, those 6 to 7 plays that were glaring are what stick out in my head. And that's, unfortunately, as an offensive lineman, for me, in my opinion, you can't have those mistakes and for me to think that you have a good game. And that's unfair. It's totally unfair because that's the problem with being an offensive lineman. When you're noticed, it's when you're not playing well or when you are driving a guy 7 yards down the field, right? Mm-hmm. And I acknowledge that that's not fair. Like, I want to go get on the couch and sit back. I feel like you were giving me some therapy there, which I appreciate because I am hard on him and I have a preconceived notion of him and how he plays. And whenever I see him mess up, it's like, yep, there it is. He's just not good. He shouldn't be in, etc. Now, I will say that I did see some good things from him. Again, and I said this last week, when he's asked to down block and he doesn't have to move and get in space, he's really good.
That's why his second half was so good.
Because they ran a lot of that. What he does well.
Right.
And I will appreciate that and I will concede that. My problem is he's not well-rounded enough to do everything that you need him to do as a 6th-year player on this team. Mm-hmm. And so that's where I'm at. And I will also
and you're
agree
also
with
going to grade him stricter than you will Andrew Kristofic, because Andrew Kristofic is making a second start. Kane Madden's in his 30s.
exactly.
Just like Josh Slug should be held to a higher standard
because
than
he's at his
Joe
15th start.
Right.
I mean,
16th actually last
16th.
night.
Yeah. So I mean, that's how it goes. I mean, you're gonna grade somebody harsher when they have more experience, right? And I said it last week, and I'll say it again. I do give the left side a little bit more of a pass than I do the right side, right? Because they have over 45 career starts or whatever it is combined, and the other two have 4 or whatever, you know, like so. So yeah, I see improvement, which is important because as a whole, as long as they keep improving, I'm going to be happy. And they are improving. And so that's good. They just have to work on certain things like letting guys come on a free release and punishing your quarterback.
Happened in his gap twice early in the game.
Correct. Yes.
So that's where my issues were for him. That's what's funny is he got the number 2 overall grade, but he had the worst pass blocking grade.
How does that work?
Somebody had said it before. I think it was Kenny Moore said it, but like their grades are just like the most bizarre. Like, I don't have a clue how you could, like, I've seen, they had a guy last year who like every individual grade was lower than his season long grade. That makes no sense.
That's math.
That's why we rarely bring up Pro Football Focus anymore, to be honest with you. Goodness. I thought Josh Lugg had a good game. Real good, steady game.
Yeah.
No mistakes.
He never stood out to me in a negative way as I was watching the film back.
I thought Joe Alt was solid. He was steady. I thought Andrew Kristofic was solid. He was steady. There was a couple times he kind of stopped his feet and got beat inside, but then he recovered. He's just got to be more consistent driving through, because he's not – the thing that Joe and Andrew and even Jarrett Patterson don't have that Kane Madden does is when he gets on you, he's so strong he can just kind of move you a little bit.
Right.
They need to have the proper leverage and technique.
Agreed.
I thought Jarrett Patterson
was a little bit.
I thought he was pretty good last night when he was working combos. I don't think he was as good in base blocks. I thought he was catching a little bit too much last night.
Yep. He got pushed back a couple times, and it affected the pocket.
Right. And that's it's a technique thing. I mean, his technique's not where it needs to be. And, I don't know if he's, well, we don't need to get into that. We know why that's the case. But I thought overall, as a whole, nobody played great. Nobody played bad. I just thought overall they were okay. They had a solid game last night, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
yep. That's what I've been asking for. Look, I can't. Look
what, like you, Vince. This is what we said. If look, because of who you have at running back,
right?
And we didn't even see Chris Tyree play. By the way, I did some digging today. There is no doghouse for Chris Tyree. It is just genuinely his workload is super low right now because he didn't practice till late in the week.
Which makes sense.
And so they felt comfortable enough letting him return kicks, especially since they knew he probably wasn't going to get much of a chance to return one the way that Carolina's kicker had been this season.
Yeah.
But they're hoping that it's basically what I was told was as soon as he's healthy, he's going to be back in the mix.
Good.
Hopefully that means that they're going to start playing 3 running backs and not just one, because I'm going to tell you something right now. Last couple games, Kyron has said to come off because he got a little dinged. And this happened to him late last year too. Remember the BC game? And he wasn't quite the same down the stretch because he was – this next game would be a really good one if Chris Tyree is back to say, hey, Kyron, you're playing phenomenal. Let's get you some work early, but let's make sure we're getting Logan and –
then you got Tyree and Diggs because I've been very impressed with Logan Diggs as he's gotten his opportunity. And you never wanted to see somebody get hurt. I would never want to see Chris Tyree get hurt. He's too dynamic. You want him on the field, but it's allowed Logan Diggs to get on the field more and prove that he belongs on the field, which I think is fantastic. And you can say the same thing about Styles as well. I mean, because of injuries and defections and, whatever, he is forced on the field. And they're seeing what he can do in practice now because he's actually practicing with the ones and he's getting his opportunity. And then they're like, wow, we got to get this guy involved. And they are. And it's awesome. And I'm so happy that it's happening, even though it's happening probably even though they didn't want it to happen with both those guys. But I'm super excited that it has happened. And I don't care the reason why.
Yeah. Couple more super chats here. Daniel Wade asks, does the QB shuffle have a big enough impact on offensive rhythm? If so, how much and in what way or ways? So this was kind of what Vince was referring to earlier. A quarterback shuffle doesn't impact the flow of the offense just because it's a quarterback rotation. What happens is if there's not a clear-cut plan, meaning, and this is where I think, even though we can nitpick a couple, like I would have had Tyler in on that one drive where they were inside the 5 and they had Jack, and you had the one where you think they should have, but we can nit because that's what the show's about, right? I mean, we're trying to apply a critical lens to the game so that people can understand the game through a coach's eyes as much as possible. That's what Irish Breakdown is all about. Some people don't understand that, and they hit the dislike button because they just want to hear a show where Brian Kelly's so great and everything is awesome, and it's my fault that they gave up 34 points last night, right? So anyway, that's what we're trying to do, but in theory, big picture, I think why the offense has worked so well the last 2 weeks is because of exactly what it should have been from the beginning, and that was this is Jack Cohn's offense, but Tyler's too good not to play. And you have to come with a very clear, defined plan of attack that the quarterbacks understand and the team understands. So they know when we do this, we know Tyler's coming in and this is what we're running. And then when Jack's in there, and we know when he's going to be in there, we've seen that the last 2 games. I think it's been, again, I can nitpick here or there, but there's been a purpose, a clear, like before it's just like, gee, we need a spark on the offense. Let's throw Tyler in there and give him a series, as we mentioned earlier. And then Jack sits, and then the offense goes down and scores. Hey, it's great. Then the defense has a whole series, and then Jack finally goes back in, and it's been a half an hour of real time or 20 minutes of real time that he hasn't played football. And that's not good. And then Tyler goes in, leads you on a touchdown, and then you don't see him again for 45 minutes of real time. Now, when I say real time, I'm talking about like real life, my body is the third, right? So a football game is 60 minutes, but it's really 3 hours.
Yeah.
So I'm talking like the real time of the 3-hour long game where you haven't played and your body gets out of rhythm. You're not seeing the game. You're not out there experiencing what's going on. And so what I've loved the game. I've loved the manner in which they've used them the last 2 weeks. And yes, you're going to run more when Tyler's in the game, but you can't just play the run.
Exactly.
And he's much more dangerous in those instances than when he is the guy, like we saw against Virginia Tech, and they can build their defensive game plan around stopping him. Because he doesn't play enough that you can spend 40% of your time on the Tyler Buchner game plan, because he's not going to get 40% of the reps.
Right.
And I think that makes Notre Dame more dangerous. So in theory, it does not have to impact the offensive rhythm. And it could impact it a ton if there's not a clear plan of attack and a clear purpose and one that everyone understands. That's when it was messing up the rhythm. So, Daniel, that's a great question. I appreciate the super chat, and I hopefully that answers your question as to why it does or doesn't. And I think we're seeing the last 2 games and we're seeing all season that a 2-quarterback system can be really bad if not used correctly. A 2-quarterback system can be really good if you have 2 players with different skills that you use correctly. But here's the thing, you've got to have a guy. Everyone's got to know who your leader is.
Correct.
And for the first time since really the first game of the year, that's not a doubt. And I think that it's not a surprise that in 3 games, and I'm not talking about what we knew going in, but how the game played out, there's been 3 games where there was no doubt from start to finish who the quarterback is. It's Jack Cohn. 3 times I think you could argue we've seen that this year. Florida State, USC, North Carolina. Notre Dame's averaging about 40 points a game in those 3 games.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And he, like we said at the top of the show, he's playing with the most confidence in the last 2 games than I've seen him play with all season, maybe with respect to Florida State. But we're seeing it consistently now. And stepping into throws when you know you're going to get face planted it is a tell sign of confidence, right? The fact that he took off and ran for the end zone is a tell of confidence.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's got some swagger back. Last night, honestly, with the exception of he's still aiming his deep balls. And what I mean by that is he's not ripping it. He's still acting like he's throwing to Wisconsin receivers. He's not. He's got to let it rip. You can watch it. It's all arm. It's all arm, Vince. He's not driving off his back foot. He's not getting his core involved at all in the throw. It's all arm, and it comes off nice, but then it hangs up a little bit because he's aiming it. He's got to just launch it. Let those guys run underneath it. Still needs to be caught. But other than that, this last night was the Jack Cohn that we expected to see.
Agreed.
This is the Jack Cohn that I thought, if the Florida State version and this version, now the key is going to be he's going to have to continue that.
Absolutely.
And good coaches, and I don't know how many of those they play moving forward because the rest of the defenses they play are pretty awful.
Absolutely.
Good coaches are going to see, okay, how do we attack that and find a way to attack it? Hopefully that they'll be prepared to handle that.
But you know what? I'm okay with the fact that they're not playing great defenses. I mean, obviously that gives the offense an opportunity to get better, but it will give them confidence, period. Because there was a high school team that we always played against that, like, for the first 6 games of the season, they just played garbage teams. Okay. Mm-hmm. And they were 6-0, right? And we're playing this tough schedule and we're lucky to be 500. And then we play them in week 7. And you know who has all the confidence? That team that's 6-0.
Right.
And it didn't matter that they were just feasted on garbage. Mm-hmm. They're 6-0. They're undefeated. Right. Like, there's something to be said for confidence.
Yep.
I'm telling you, Cohn is playing with confidence. His offense is starting to play with confidence. And if they can keep this rolling, whatever they draw in the postseason, whether it's a playoff, whether it's New Year's 6 or whatever, they're going to go into that with confidence.
If they can keep doing this.
If they can
keep
doing it.
It's because when you are an offensive line, for example, and this is the key, and look, we know if we give Jack time, he's going to shred. And we know if we can just get a body on a body, Kyron's going to go off.
Yeah.
It gives you so much more sense of purpose as a line. And we're seeing that. Like, hey, if you do your job, this is what Kyron's going to do.
Right.
And you know, I've talked a lot about how, you know, I say, you know, Kyron's not a top 5 captain and all this because, again, I think, you know, we're kind of living in the moment, and I'm not trying to get into that, but here's the reason he's a great captain this year. You never saw Kyron Williams publicly show up his terrible offensive line.
Right.
Ever. And
Agreed.
if any player ever had a reason to show up as teammates, it was Kyron. And that leadership is why they kept battling and battling and battling. And you can just see the way they react when he gets big runs, right? And you can see the way he treats his teammates when he does those things. And that to me is a really big part of what makes him, you want to play for a guy like that. Like, honestly, I've seen this, not myself, but I've been on team, like, meaning me, but I've been on teams as a coach and as a player where you had this running back that's just a giant prick.
Yeah.
And he just, you know, you'd block 10 straight times, and the one time he gets hit, he's in your face throwing the ball. It's like, you know what? I think I'm going to let this guy through this time.
We've had lookout blocks before.
You know, but the point is, but when you have a kid like Kyron and like Jack, and Jack's quiet, Jack doesn't get in. I mean, again, Jack Cohn's another person who could have had every reason in the world to get in his line's face and say, stop. I'm sick of getting hit in the effing face.
I mean,
you know what I mean? Like, do your stinking job,
right.
You know, but he never did.
Yeah.
And that is why the line has been able to play through how terrible it was for 6 games, 5 games, and keep getting better because the leaders kept saying, hey, just keep working. Now, again, it's helped that they're playing a bad part of the schedule. But look, Toledo wasn't any great shakes either. Right. Neither was Florida State, you know, and they still play terrible. So they're genuinely getting better.
Yes, agreed.
It's not just because of the poor play. So
I completely agree.
That's my sense on that. And then we have a super chat from Sawyer Leonard. This show is so awesome. Thank you for the super chat, Sawyer. I haven't signed up for the message board yet because I literally don't have enough time in the day after the YouTube shows. Thanks, gentlemen, for the awesome content. And we'll get you over there one of these days. We'll get you. But we just are happy you're part of our community. And our community isn't the message board and then everybody else. It's everybody that comes in here. So we appreciate your super chat.
Got one more from Patrick down there if you want to hit that.
We do?
Yes, we do.
Okay, you saw his there you go. Patrick Barnes, thank you for the super chat. Did y'all hear Kelly say that we were dumb for not changing the offense to Cohn's strengths sooner?
Yeah.
Did he really say that?
He said that a week ago. basically, for the most part. He said, I wish I was smarter for not coming up with this sooner, coming off the bye week. And then
did he say it sarcastically?
And then literally Cone gets up next and he's like, yeah, man, I used to run this in high school and it was great and blah, blah, blah. Like,
yeah, because that was then a week before Kelly was talking about how he'd never run that before.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's like, come on, man. Just talk.
Y'all want to know why I don't pay attention to Brian Kelly's press conferences anymore?
Right.
That's exactly why.
Exactly. Like, talk to the kid for 45 seconds.
This is why he needs to listen to the Irish Breakdown podcast. Vince, he'd have known this back in March if he would have paid attention to our show. That's all I'm saying. And there are people that are going to take that seriously, and I'm mostly kidding. Mostly. So, Vince, let's talk some Notre Dame defense.
Yes.
Here's my big hot take that people are not going to like. As I broke down the game plan, and again, I'm breaking the game plan down for what their goal is, not what I would like. There's a difference between what I like and what is effective based on what the coach wants to run. Game plan-wise, I had no issue with last night, and I'll explain why. Number one, I felt early in the game they were much more aggressive out of their three-man fronts. We saw a lot more of Jordan Patelho in three-man and more of Isaiah Foskey on the line.
I did notice that. Yeah.
And they were aggressive. Now, they weren't perfect, but there was a lot of times where Isaiah was playing on the second level and he was coming downhill and attacking more, which I liked. We talked before the game that North Carolina is a great deep ball team. They hit 2 deep balls. One was on an illegal pick that wasn't called. The other was on a blown coverage.
Yep.
They didn't hit any other deep balls the rest of the game.
Correct.
Notre Dame played more cover 4, and that is so cover 4 is more of an off coverage. When I say cover 4, Vince, I'm talking old school cover 4, not like modern cover 4 with the double robber. I'm talking like old school cover 4 where they get the snap, everybody's working back. Now that got him beat a couple times. Cam Hart got beat on the comeback route on a 3rd and 9.
4 guys, each responsible for a quarter of the field.
Deep.
Right? I just want to make sure everybody understands that.
Right. Yeah. A modern cover 4 is more of those guys will play like more alleys. Now, it ended up being old school cover 4 if there's an automatic vertical release, but a lot of times they'll kind of play the alleys run first. If it's play action, then the corner's got to kind of play the post, right? Where in an old school cover 4, the safeties play the post, correct, Vince? Mm-hmm. In a new school cover 4, the safeties have to play the post on certain things, right? So, again, now old school cover 4, if you run double post or a drive and a post over top, the corner's going to have to play the post, right? But you understand the point that I'm making. The primary middle of the field defenders are the safeties, and that's what they were doing last night. And that's why a lot of times they were not getting deep shots.
Right.
And why they had to kind of scheme their way into some deep shots. And
they actually stopped calling vertical routes, North Carolina.
Because the second half they didn't call a ton. The one they did was a play action not trick play, but like the pump fake it wasn't a traditional deep shot. Right. They did that to get the outside to get the guys to bite in. That was the only thing that could get them to bite in was that play. And it was well designed and well called. I thought Phil Longo called a really good game last night, and he adjusted quickly to Notre Dame. Notre Dame countered back. I thought that they took away what Carolina does best, which opened up some Sam Howell runs, and they didn't execute effectively. I thought he put a lot of trust on the front 6, meaning the 4 down and the 2 backers, to make more plays, and they didn't make enough of them.
They had trouble finishing at times.
They didn't make enough of them. But
at the quarterback, I should say.
Schematically,
yeah,
I had no issues with last night. I think now, again, execution is also under the coach's domain. It's your job to get those guys prepared. Absolutely. So this is not I'm taking Marcus Freeman did a great job. What I'm saying is Marcus Freeman put a good game plan together last night, in my opinion. What the coaches didn't do a good enough job of at all 3 levels was preparing them to then execute that game plan. That was the issue. And it was even like the tunnel screen that went for 31 yards. There was one guy on defense that had any clue that they were running that tunnel screen. Even though it was obvious at the snap that they were running that tunnel screen backside, the backers over pursued. The D-line had no concept. The safeties had no concept. The the pump fake, there were so many missed out that turning tight ends loose. I mean, that wasn't the only time they got beat on that play. They also beat Notre Dame with that pump fake early, but it went to a tight end. I thought there was a lot of mistakes, a lot of sloppy play last night, which again falls under the purview of the coaches. I can't sit there and say that the receivers playing fundamentally unsound and the O-line playing unfundamentally sound is Dell Alexander and Jeff Quinn's fault, but then not say the same thing about the defense right now. Last night was more of an aberration compared to what we've seen all season. But here's a couple things that people aren't going to like. 34 points was too much for me. That was North Carolina's fourth lowest point total of the season. Okay. They have to execute a lot better than they did last night.
Agreed.
But I feel a lot better about a game like being able to fix what we saw last night than I felt about whether or not Notre Dame could fix the things that was going on for the offense the first 6 games of the year. Because structurally there were problems. Fundamentally, like at the foundational level, there were problems that needed to be addressed. Foundationally, I don't think there's issues with what they're doing, even though it's not my preferred style of attack. I don't think it's Marcus Freeman's preferred style of attack because they're not being super aggressive. But they have to figure out a way to better execute that when they play Virginia because it's going to be a very similar game plan against Virginia. I thought they executed the game plan very well against USC. They did not execute against North Carolina. The difference, one team had a mobile quarterback, the other one didn't. Simple as that.
And he was super mobile last night.
And they're going to pay some more. I don't know if Brennan Armstrong's going to be healthy enough to play against Notre Dame, but he can run. Jeff Sims can definitely run. Couple teams are going to play don't have mobile. Well, really one, Stanford. Navy has option. It's a different animal.
Obviously, it's a different conversation.
So, and we don't know what they're going to face in the postseason, right? But they're going to have to figure this out because this is the more and more teams are having mobile quarterbacks, and they have to be able to find answers to being aggressive, but also not letting quarterbacks just grain free. That was the issue for me. I thought defensive line wise, Vince, there were way too many missed gaps. Mm-hmm. They were running. Remember, we said they should run twists and stuff before the game. They ran a decent number of those, but what was happening is Kurt Heinisch at times was not getting over on his, and then other times the loopers weren't getting over, and it was opening up these big holes. And so they weren't finishing the twist the way North Carolina's defensive line was. That to me was an execution problem, not a scheme problem. So overall, Vince, what is your response and your thoughts on that hot take right there by me?
No, listen, I agree with you. I didn't really have an issue with the scheme last night watching it live. It was the execution. It was the lack of execution that I was seeing. And it was, look, if Notre Dame finishes around the quarterback last night, every time that they got near him and got there, and I'll even go this far, every time they got their hand on him, if they finish that, we're talking about a completely different defensive situation here. Too many times they didn't finish around Sam Howell. And part of that is because they just didn't execute. And part of it is because Sam Howell's pretty freaking good. Like sometimes, again, you got to tip your cap, right? I mean, he had a heck of a game. He accounted for over 400 yards by himself. And so you have to, but at the same time, they should have brought him down on numerous occasions where he turned it into a first down or he got away and was able to throw it.
It was more about them than him.
Correct. Absolutely correct. They allowed him to do what he did to a degree, right? And again, I give him all the credit in the world. He had a great game, but they helped him with that. They propped him up. And again, if they finish every time they put their hands on him, we're having a completely different conversation, and they probably score in the low 20s. Okay. And that means Notre Dame wins by 20. And we're not necessarily praising Marcus Freeman, but we're not having the same conversation.
Right. So because he's responsible. Him and his staff are responsible for both aspects.
No question.
What we're trying to make sure you understand is last night's defense was not good enough because Notre Dame should be holding them to worse than their fourth best. What I'm trying to say is there's some context. This wasn't like, people are like, I literally had people telling me this was a Brian Van Gorder. No, if Brian Van Gorder was the defensive coordinator, they'd have scored 60 last night. Okay. So let's chill out a little bit on that.
Right. Agreed.
The other part too, is that Notre Dame started ripping off some big plays that kept giving North Carolina the ball back. They scored 13 points in the first half because they only had 4 possessions.
Right.
second half, Notre Dame starts ripping off some big plays and they're going to give up points. But, again, they were still in control for a decent chunk of that game. So the point being that we're going to discuss some things that were the problem last night. The reason that I want to start off with that is because if it's fundamentals and technique that's the issue, that can get addressed a lot quicker than our scheme isn't good and it's creating problems and we have to shift gears, which is something that can require a bye week like we saw in offense. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's the difference. It's like, okay, we got to tackle better. Why were we missing? Well, a lot of it, Vince, I thought there was a lot of guys coming out of control.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like flying in and no coming to balance. And then the opposite was happening with so linebackers and D linemen, I thought, were playing out of control. JD Bertrand missed several tackles last night because I just thought he was out of control, took bad angles, and he's like left kind of flying in the air, but like with the guy running through his arm, right?
Yeah.
I thought we saw that up front. The defensive linemen weren't arriving at the ball with force, which was allowing the quarterback to get off of them. The secondary was kind of the opposite. They were passive on the back end at safety and corner.
They were worried about getting beat. I think there was a real fear of, man, I can't let anything get behind me. I need to make sure everything stays in front of me. And so I'm going to take that extra second to make sure that happens as opposed to coming up and then getting beat over the top.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that was part of it. And part of that is because 14 was on the sideline,
Yeah.
And somebody said, I think it was in the chat, that Kyle Hamilton is an eraser of mistakes.
Yes.
That's a fact. That is a cold hard fact. And guys can play looser when they know that Kyle Hamilton is in the game.
Right.
I mean,
the defensive coordinator can as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Completely agree with that.
So, I mean, I'd say if you had Kyle, you probably take at least a touchdown off the board last night.
I think that's fair.
Just
I think
overall,
he blows up that tunnel screen.
Even if it's not that, just in general, something
right.
he would have made some sort of play that takes a touchdown off. Otherwise, he's not as good as you think if he's not worthy of – if the points are going to be the same whether he plays or not, then he's not that impactful of a player.
Sure.
And that's obviously not the case. But I thought the safety play – I thought DJ Brown played well outside of the angle he took on that 53-yard touchdown. That was really bad.
Yeah,
and he's not a player, as we've said, he's not a player that can afford to take a bad angle. He's just
he's not fast,
not athletic enough.
No,
overall. And to me, the just the lack of discipline coming up, but then other times, like the 31-yard touchdown run, the manner in which Houston Griffith played that was, I don't even know if I have an adjective to use. It's not going to be insulting, but it was.
It's not good.
It's not good. There was other times where I thought Houston came into the hole looking for a block, like looking for a blocker, I should say, as opposed to looking for the ball.
And you hesitate when you do that.
Drew White did that a lot yesterday.
I agree.
That was an issue for him last year, a ton. And he hasn't shown that version of himself this year. He did that a lot last night. Like
right. And
he
explain
was running
that
into blockers. So that's
yeah.
Well, it wasn't so much hesitating. It's like he couldn't find the ball. And so what he was doing is when you see the ball, you have a gap you have to attack, right? Every call kind of has – now sometimes it's two.
Sure.
So if I'm a linebacker on the left, if the run is to me, I have the play side B gap. If the run is away from me, I have the play side A gap, or I have the backside A gap, right? You have to play your gap. When you can find the ball, you play your gap with a focus on getting to the ball. So I see the ball, so I'm going to attack this gap, but I'm going to attack it left. I'm inside, or I'm taking on this guard, but I know where the ball is going, so I'm going to hit him in a certain way that forces the ball back inside or forces a bounce. Drew didn't look like he knew where the ball was going last night. I could be wrong, but this is what it looked like to me, and that was forcing him to just hit blockers. Like, okay, this is my gap. I'm not sure the ball is, so I'm going to take on this guard. And as the running back's running right past him. And he had no clue, because usually when you get beat like that, you're still kind of trying to at least reach for the ball. No thought of that, because I don't think he knew where the ball was. The linebacker play was really bad. They had a really tough time. They could not figure out if the ball was being handed off or thrown. They were having a brutal time of that, and it created a passivity that caused a lot of problems. This was the most blockable. The linebackers last night looked like what the linebackers looked like all last year. We haven't seen that from them this year. Even when they've made the mistakes, like when J.D. Bertrand's made mistakes this year, it's been aggressive mistakes. When Drew White has made mistakes this year, they've been aggressive mistakes. Last night looked more like last year. And that tells me they weren't comfortable with their – like, I liked the game plan. I don't think the players were always comfortable with their role in it.
Sure.
Is how it looked. I could be wrong on that, right? But that's how it looked the way they executed at the linebacker level. When I say players, I'm referring to the linebackers.
Right.
It was a rough night in that regards, Vince.
Yep. Yeah,
which is why you saw that 53-yard touchdown, just like the Red Sea parting.
Yes,
because
they all ran into
blockers.
Every one of them ran into it. Again, you got to give credit to North Carolina.
And catching the blockers a little bit too. That's the difference.
And that's what it is. Because I called it a hesitation when it almost looks like they're looking for a block, because they don't go into it as aggressively and as strong as they should. It's like, oh, he's going to block. It's like you kind of hesitate a little bit, and then when you take that block on, you can't get off of it, because you're not physically attacking that block. And you hear the term block destruction, right? There's no block destruction when you just take on a block. Mm-hmm. And that's what happened on that run. And it was very disappointing for me.
Cornerback play. It's a problem, Vince. And I thought Tariq Bracy was solid.
Yes, I agree.
I think the two times where he got beat, neither were necessarily on him. I don't care who you are, unless you are a top 15 overall draft pick at corner, you're not getting jammed illegally like that and running with Josh Downs.
Right.
Not going to happen. The tunnel screen, I think he could have played better. He's got to get off blocks better. His coverage, I thought, was sound. Clarence was just kind of okay. I thought they did a good job of not putting him in any man coverage situations last night.
Right.
Cam Hart was solid, okay, but they're just not getting great play right now. Teams have figured out how to avoid Cam Hart.
Right.
And
when that's the case, you need somebody else to step up.
Right. And just Ramon Henderson, to me, he's long, he's athletic, but he just has no feel for the game. Even if you just take away the blown coverage, because I don't know if it was him or Cam Hart, it looked to me like it was Ramon.
Yeah, I agree. Because
Cam was outside, Ramon was in the slot. Explain it. Yes.
The reason I say that is more from a body language standpoint. Cam Hart looked pissed, and he didn't look pissed at himself. He looked pissed at somebody else, and it looked like it was like, man, what are you doing? Kind of upset. You know what I mean? And that, to me, when we don't know what the call is, the reaction of the players can sometimes tell you what the call is.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like from that reaction that Ramon was supposed to stay back and Cam was supposed to come up.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean,
which is normally how you play it.
Correct.
Because it was, that's normally how you're going to play that. Yes.
Yes. Yep.
Here's a great, this isn't a super chat, but this is a great comment from Nolan Sanchez. I compare playing I've never heard anyone ever compare football and golf appropriately. Every time I've ever heard anyone say compare football and golf, I'm like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. First time that I don't think this is great. Now, I don't know if this is how it works in golf, because I don't play golf, and when I do, it's not really playing golf, it's hacking. Okay.
Right.
I compare playing aggressive in football to playing aggressive in golf. It's not aiming at every pin. It's picking a spot and playing aggressively to your spot. Same here. That is a great analogy, especially when we're talking about linebackers. It's not so much just flying to the ball, right? And this is what we're trying to say. It's you got to fly to the ball with purpose, with direction. Hey, I've got to attack the B gap. The ball's going here. The ball's going in the C gap. So what I got to do is I got to take on my blocker in the B gap and blow them up and blow them into the ball.
Correct.
Right? So if everyone's just running to the ball, then what you have is elementary school soccer, right? Where it's like, it's just this mass of people all kind of going in the same direction, right? Magnet ball. There has to be a sense of purpose within the game plan. And so, but what we were seeing last night was there was none of that. They were just running right into the straight in the middle of blockers with no sense of where the ball's coming and that's the issue. So Nolan, that's a tremendous analogy, and to me, right on point. Here's another comment I want to address that's along these lines from Jeff Hoy. Jeff asks, I know the coaches are responsible for preparing the players to properly execute the game plan. At what point do you hold the players responsible for their lack of proper execution? This is a great question. Players always have a role in execution to a degree. Here's my rule of thumb for when a coach is at fault. Now, number one, a position coach is always ultimately responsible for how his players perform in a game. And that is one of two ways, right? One is it's your job to make sure that you've done the best job you can preparing that player. Two, if he's not executing the way you've prepared him, find somebody else.
Correct.
Right? Now,
if it's a systemic problem, then
right,
that's on the coach.
So here's what I mean. So if I'm watching the Notre Dame offensive line, and I'll use two examples, right? I look at the 2016 offensive line, which was not a great offensive line. But all season, the problem was one position, right guard. And they kept trying different players. It was Colin McGovern. They tried different guys, and those players were not getting it done. But McGlinchey was playing well. Q was playing well. I thought Mustipher had a good year that year, and I thought Bars had a good year at right tackle. But the line just was never played its potential because they couldn't get the right guard thing figured out. To me, that's more of a player thing, right? Then you look at what we saw a lot of this year where it was just issues across the board. Everybody's having that problem, okay? Same thing could happen at corner. You have a corner that just bites on something every time. None of the other corners do that, right? I'm usually going to put that on that one corner because he's really the only one having that problem. Or maybe it's a second guy on a 9 to 10 man depth chart. But when all the corners or all the linebackers or most of them are having that issue, that's more of a coaching problem. So let's take last night, for example. If it was just the safeties that had a bad game, I'd say, okay, Chris O'Leary didn't do a good job. Or if it was just one safety, I'd say, DJ or Houston or whoever didn't have a good game, right? When it's just the Mike linebacker, I may say, hey, Drew had a bad night, right? Which we've said before at times this year. What we saw last night, was all three levels having similar problems with tackling. We saw the D-line miss tackles. We saw the linebackers miss tackles. We saw corners miss tackles. We saw safeties miss tackles.
Yep.
To me, that is a coaching problem. Clearly, whatever you're doing, you didn't do enough work on that. The line stunts not hitting. Okay, whatever you were doing in your preparation kept you from your players from executing the way you needed to do. So yes, that's why I say I view last night as more of a coaching problem. And,
sure.
and I'll be willing to bet you that Coach Freeman would say the same thing.
Right, absolutely.
Great coaches usually are more hard. Okay, so
look, that's what Kelly said at the post game. He's like, defensively, it was a coaching problem.
Well, but Kelly tends to
I know, but he
did
did
the
say
bus
that
at times in that regards. He's been kind of blaming the defense this year, even when I didn't think the defense was a fault. But at least, yeah, I get your point. But I've known assistant coaches at Notre Dame recently that I could never write something unless I said that guy sucks and needs to be fired. I could not have said, which I would never do. I could not have been more critical of him than he was to himself when he'd call me after games and we talk about what I saw, what he saw, right? Because his thing was if anyone's holding me to a higher standard than me, then that's a me problem, right? Marcus Freeman did not get to where he got to at a young age by not being very critical and thoughtful of the job he does on a daily basis. I guarantee you Marcus Freeman looked at last night and said, we didn't execute for crap.
Right.
That's on me.
Yeah. He didn't get a good night's sleep last night. I guarantee it. I guarantee it.
And not because he's like freaking Drew. Like you know how I knew a coach was bad? I could tell within like a week of working with a guy if he was a bad coach when I coached, is the guy that were always getting pissed at players.
Right.
It's like every one of your kids pisses you off because none of them are doing right. Maybe you're the problem. You know what I mean? Or we'd be in a staff meeting and be like, hey, every time something goes wrong with the offensive line, we had a line coach once. It was just like, oh, freaking so-and-so and freaking so-and-so. And it's just like, hey man, we keep having the same problem, and it's your guys. Maybe they're not the problem. Maybe you are, right? There's nothing about Marcus Freeman that strikes me as being that kind of guy.
Right.
I guarantee it wasn't frickin' Drew and frickin' J. Now, where he's going to feel that way is J.D. Bertrand's personal foul. Yeah. That was just dumb. You don't every player in the country knows you don't come down through a quarterback when you dive.
Right.
When you jump, you come down like this, or you just leave them up.
Right.
Right. When you jump for the ball, you don't come down. You're not going to block a pass going like this. You block a pass going like this.
You're looking to get a cheap one in.
Look like I'm on a roller coaster. But you stay high. You don't come down through. I don't fault him for like last week. I don't fault J.D. Bertrand for that personal foul. That was to me it's a bad rule or a bad call. That one was 100% on J.D. Because nobody else does that. We saw defensive linemen jumping up like this all night last night, and they weren't coming down like that on Sam Howell. He's maybe pissed about that, but I don't think he's necessarily holding his players accountable for all the other tackling things. I mean, when your whole team's not tackling, you're going to look in the mirror and say, I did a terrible job getting these guys ready to play.
Yeah.
Good coaches do that, and I think Marcus Freeman's a really good coach.
Agreed.
I'll bet you Mike Ellison's doing the same thing. Man, I got to figure out a way to get these guys to finish better on the ball.
Absolutely.
Guarantee he's sitting there saying that to himself. And I guarantee you Mike Mickens is pissed at the job he did to get his guys ready to play last night. All of them. Same with Chris O'Leary, because that's what good coaches do.
Right.
And so I hope, Jeff, that kind of answers your question, but that's why we say that even though schematically it was good, I still feel like that's only half of the job of a coach is the scheme. If the scheme's great, but the players can't execute it, then the scheme is useless.
Mm-hmm.
Simple as that. JD Buellsfeld, JP. Thank you. We were talking about JD Bertrand. It's in my head. Thank you for Irish Breakdown, and thank you, JP, for being a part of our community.
We got a couple more. Do you want to get?
Got a couple more that I wanted to get to here, Vince. I screenshotted them just in case.
I got Patrick Barnes up here. Okay. Yep, you got it.
You go ahead and read that one?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Patrick, for the super chat. Really appreciate it. He says, have we possibly seen Kyle Hamilton play his last game for Notre Dame as the draft coming for him? How much did his absence affect the score of the game? We kind of talked about that last part. I would say at least a touchdown.
I'd say that's a conservative. I mean,
I think so. At least a touchdown. I think he would have made some plays that would have prevented them from getting into the area.
And if they would have got 34, it'd have been that last drive. They'd have punched in to give them 34.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Something like that.
Right. Absolutely.
It'd have been a cheap 34.
As far as the other part, have we seen the last? I don't think so, but I don't know any details about his injury.
Well, it's a twofold thing from what I'm told. I'm told that it's the knee, but it's also that he's had another injury that's been kind of lingering throughout the year. And I think it's just about how he heals the next couple weeks.
Sure.
I don't really care to get into whether he should or shouldn't. We're having that debate on the message board. I have some strong feelings on it, but it's always dependent on the specifics of the situation.
Absolutely.
If it's a thing where he's going to be fine, healthy, to play, but he just chooses not to because he doesn't want to risk another injury, I don't necessarily I don't like that. If it's something where this is going to kind of linger through the whole year, there's a chance you could hurt it further, then we have to have a different conversation as a family.
Yeah.
I don't know the extent. I don't think any of the issues he has are things that could be worse, but we'll see how he heals up the next couple weeks. Right. For me, I'll definitely say this. There's no way in heck if I'm his advisor, parent, position coach that he's playing against Navy.
No way.
No way.
No chance.
Because of the chops and number one, you don't need Kyle Hamilton to beat. If you can beat North Carolina without Kyle Hamilton, you can darn sure beat Navy without Kyle Hamilton.
And Navy does nothing for Kyle Hamilton's future.
Nothing.
Like it doesn't raise his draft stock.
No.
Wow.
He was not a first-round pick for us until we saw him make 18 tackles against Navy. Yeah, offense he'll never ever face ever
because
again.
Like the Colts aren't running triple option,
right?
You know what I mean?
The only time a game like that could help a defensive back is if it's a guy who maybe you question, okay, is he a strong tackler? How is he taking on blocks? That's not a question for Kyle Hamilton.
Nope.
We all know he can hit and he's a good tackler and all that. So and as a team, I don't need him to beat them. If I'm Marcus Freeman and I'm Chris O'Leary, hey, we don't need you to beat Navy. We need you to beat Virginia. We need you to beat Georgia Tech. We need you to beat Stanford, and we definitely need you to beat whoever we get in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And so I think that's something where Notre Dame needs to be smart and not try to force the issue of trying to get him to play against Navy, because that's when I may, as a parent, say, okay, you know what? You guys want to do that? Then we're not playing him at all.
And here's a very non-analytical, just my observation on the situation. He had an earpiece in last night where he was hearing the defensive calls, and he had a play sheet in front of him, and he was taking notes on the play sheet. Like, he was dialed into what was going on in the game, and that is not the behavior of somebody who has checked out and is not going to continue to play.
Kyle's going to want to play no matter what. Yeah. What would happen is maybe some of the people advising him would say, hey, listen, you have this injury. It's not going away. There's a chance it could get worse. And you may say, hey, Kyle, we need to have a talk.
Right.
Kyle's always going to, from everything I've ever heard about Kyle Hamilton, and I don't know him personally.
Right.
But from everything I've ever been told from coaches, teammates, opponents, there's not a doubt in my mind that if you ask Kyle, what do you want to do? He's going to say, I want to play against Navy. Not only does he want to play against Virginia and Georgia Tech, he wants to play against Navy.
Period. Yeah.
That's never going to be a question. But sometimes, the adults in the room have to be able to say, hey, look, we need to make a smarter decision.
Sure.
So we'll dive more into that in the message board, but that I at least wanted to address that now. But none of us know. We can all have the rumors and rumblings and all that kind of stuff, but it just is going to depend on how his body heals over the next week. But I hope that Brian Kelly comes in tomorrow and says, hey, you know what? We're not playing Kyle this week for precautionary reasons. Yeah, he could probably get him healthy enough to play, but we don't,
Right.
We're not going to put him in that position. I think that would do very well for Brian Kelly, because I'll be honest, one of the criticisms I've heard about him over the years has been there have been a number of players, sometimes rightly, sometimes not rightly, that felt that they didn't always give them the best advice on going back and playing. And it created some longer term issues. And I think that's always a natural concern that players have about coaches in general.
Sure.
Of course, you're going to tell me I need to play. You need me to play. If Kyle Hamilton gets cleared medically to play, but Brian Kelly says, nope, that would go over very well in the locker room.
I agree.
Because it's like, hey,
he's looking out for us.
He's looking out for me.
Yeah,
yes. You got a better shot at beating Navy or beating Navy the way you need to with Kyle. You're always better when Kyle plays.
No doubt.
But you know what? Coach has my back. Right. I think that would be huge.
And I think a lot of players already feel that way, and this would just reinforce that.
Well, this year so far.
This year. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this year.
It hasn't been the issue for a long time. And I think there still are some players that have that in the back of their mind. He has his back as far as he's the cheap shots and stuff like that. That's a whole different deal than no All-American top 10 NFL draft pick. We're not playing you, even though you're cleared. I think that would be a completely different thing. We got Connor Patton says, after momentum creating interceptions, we see field goals that feel disappointing. How can they keep the momentum going after turnovers? Do you know what's funny about this, Connor? Thank you very much for the super chat, by the way. I hope you're enjoying your new residence and your new home state. This is something we praise them for. It's like this. This is what kills me about this offense. They can never put it all together. Like all those. Remember Vince? Like after the Wisconsin game, and there's other games early where it's like, the offense sucked, but man, they did a great job of taking turnovers and turning them into
turnovers.
Touchdowns.
Yeah, right. Off of turnovers. We were praising them for what they did off of turnovers. Absolutely.
Yeah. And now it's like when the offense is doing other things really well, it's like now they're
I know, right?
Doing that.
Because believe me, nobody wanted them to score a touchdown after that interception more than I did, because that would have game over. You know what I mean? Absolute game over. And it's frustrating.
Right.
I think they had 2 drives stall out on the 2-yard line. Like, are you kidding me right now?
And then you go back to last week with the interception that Bo Bauer had.
Yeah.
I mean, because in this game, DJ had that pick. DJ Brown had that pick, which was a great read, by the way.
That's awesome.
But DJ has and it was the one bad ball that Sam Howell had all night.
Seriously.
And he picked it. But you've got to get 6 there.
Right.
I mean, what was the score at that point? It was 31. Was it was 31-20? I'm trying to. I got the. You got the stat sheet, Vince?
Let's see here. So Notre Dame scores on the 91-yard TD run to make it 38-27, and then Brown picks it off. So then it was
38-27.
Then it was 41-27 because they got a field goal out of it.
So, I mean, you put the game away at that point in time if you punch it into the end zone.
Oh, no doubt.
It's 45-27.
Yeah,
Your defense pins its ears back on that
Yes.
next series, and you're,
game, set,
Yeah.
match. Done. Yep.
Yeah. But early in the game, they got a short field because of a kick return and turned it into points, right? Well, it was a kick return plus a penalty, wasn't it? It was the 47-yard kick return plus a 15-yard, because I remember the flag got thrown. I'm thinking, oh, geez, that's going to come back. But it was on North Carolina. And that they turned that into a touchdown. So, I mean, so they're doing it. But, yeah, I'm with you, Connor. It is frustrating, especially since that was the one thing they were really good at when they're stunk.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So true.
But I think that's the other encouraging thing to me, Vince, is the last 2 weeks we've seen this offense score, was it 75 points, right? I mean, just the offense getting points. I mean, I know that they got things set up and all that kind of stuff.
But still the offense,
that's 37.5 points a game, and they've left at least 7 to 10 points on the board in both games.
Both games, totally.
Even more so against USC, but
like
even
14
in this game,
to 21-ish points combined. Yeah, absolutely.
You can't have 2 drives. You can't. They had 3. Jonathan Doerr's stat line in this game was ridiculous. Listen, he had a field goal of his long field goal was 31 yards.
Right.
It means he kicked. That means they snapped it from the 13-yard line. His other 2 field goals were 20 and 21, which means the drives ended at the 2 and the 3. They kicked a field goal from a distance shorter than an extra point.
Correct.
That can't happen. And that was the one thing in the offensive line. You want to know why, like when we say they get no movement, those are the perfect examples of they just don't get a push. They just don't get a movement.
Which is why in the red zone, I don't like them going to 12 and 13 personnel, because
unless
that is going to require
Buckner in the game,
everybody to come into the box and et cetera, and you are not putting your offensive line, who we know doesn't get a great push, in a position to not get a great push.
Right.
Like, spread it out, do some different things.
2 things you need to do. 1, put Tyler Buckner in the game.
Right.
2, have Michael Mayer move. Right. Have him be off the line and move, so you can sprint out and roll out. And then 3, here's the thought. You go 13 personnel, they're going to put a bunch of big dudes on the field. They might not even have, especially when you go 14, they may not even have a corner on the field. So 1, they're going to have safeties and linebackers. Put 87 out, throw a fade. I mean, you got a better shot of doing that than you do of trying to run in with this line in close distance. Because they're just not going to – scoring from the 2-yard line is not about execution correctness or assignment correctness. It's about blowing dudes off the ball. I mean, it's as simple as that, Vince. And that's where they got to get better. Real quick, Tommy Guns, Brian and Vince, can you talk about the pros and cons of everyone on D in a 2-point stance and moving around? Pros, if the other team has no discipline, you may occasionally kind of catch them off guard and hit it. If the other team is smart and disciplined, they're going to gash you and take off. And the reason for that, Tommy, is because you even within chaos, there's still no one any good has unstructured chaos as part of their game plan. Nobody good. That's why John stunk. That's why Brian Van Gorder stunk. Right? At Notre Dame. You have to, even when it looks like you're doing a lot, there's a purpose to it. There's a you'll see Notre Dame do that on 3rd round. Like, all these guys are moving around, but they know they know
exactly where they're supposed to end up.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you're moving a lot of guys, like, it's one thing to move Isaiah Foskey or 2 guys, but if you're moving everybody around, you don't know when they're going to snap. You may be in like mid sentence or mid move where everybody's kind of like right here, and then they snap and they pitch that thing outside.
Right.
You have to have a little bit more organization of the chaos. As far as playing cover, the 2-point stance, the problem with everyone being in a 2-point stance is you're almost guaranteed to lose the leverage battle.
Correct.
Which means you're gonna lose at the line of scrimmage more often than not. If a lineman's coming out of a 3-point stance and you're in the 2-point stance, your ability to win the leverage battle against him is low, because
he can get underneath you.
That's okay on the edge when you're trying to set the edge, right? That's not okay when you're a nose or a 3 technique or a 5. But thinking outside the box, Tommy, I like that. And I think we have another super chat down here.
D, I think is the last
JP's,
one.
Josh Phillips. Is that who?
Corey
okay,
D.
we got 2 more. Okay, we got 2 more. Okay, that's JP. Corey D says, have you heard anything regarding Tyree seemingly disappearing from the game plan? We talked about that a little bit earlier, Corey. I'm not sure if you missed that. He was not cleared to play offense. From what I was told, and I think Kelly actually mentioned this also, that he didn't start practicing till like Thursday.
Right.
He was cleared enough to return kicks in a game they didn't think that they were going to return a lot of kicks, because North Carolina doesn't they don't give up a lot of kick returns. On the season, North Carolina has allowed in 8 games 6 kick returns. That's it. Now, they give up a lot of points. Teams have kicked off, or they've scored a lot of points. They've kicked off a lot, right? Vince, how many times? They have 38 touchdowns on the season, and they have, plus you're always going to kick 1 a game, so that's 46.
Yep.
Right? Plus you have 8 field goals. You've kicked off over 50 times, if my math is correct, almost 60, and you've given up 6 returns. They knew that Chris wasn't going to get many chances, if any. Yeah. But if they did, he was at least healthy enough to return a kick.
He's healthy enough to be your best option back there.
To step up and take on blocks and play. They weren't comfortable that, but
and I get
that's
that.
why.
I get that.
I was concerned he had kind of fallen to the doghouse and all this other stuff, but fortunately, from what I was told,
thank goodness,
that's not the case. And so that would explain why he was on kick returns, but not at running back. So good question. Hopefully we answer that question. Josh Phillips says, at least Dorr didn't miss any field goals. No, he was money last night.
And he was down the middle, I think, on every single one.
He was
well as all of his extra points. And look, we've had issues with him with the short ones, like the far ones, anything like 45 plus. It's like, he's going to hit this one, no problem. And then it's the short ones. You're like, oh gosh, I don't know if this is going to, But he was true on every single one. So, we can bang him when he misses them, but when he hits them all, we got to give him credit. And I give him a lot of credit for hitting all of his free, because you needed every one of those points. Yeah,
I want to address this too. Sid Irish coming with a negative point of view of something. I'm shocked by that, Sid. Says, I prefer Styles to Lindsey, and people talking about, Lindsey leaving, and Kenny Moore says, so do I, Sid Irish, but I don't want to lose Lindsey. Lindsey Sr. will survive. And then somebody talks about being used correctly, and Sid says, if it hasn't happened in 4 years, why would it now?
It has happened.
Did you forget the 2019 season?
Right. Scored
this
4
is
different
my
ways.
issue.
Yeah.
Braden Lindsey and Lorenzo Styles are not similar players.
Not at all.
I also kind of get tired of this whole, well, this guy's good, so screw that guy. Aren't you better with both of them?
Right.
Yeah, and this has been our whole conversation the whole year, is use them all, play them to their skill sets. The problem that Notre Dame has right now is at receiver. The one big criticism, one of the many criticisms I have, but the big one I have, is they're not using the receivers to the skill set of the receivers. The reason Lorenzo Styles played well last night is because they used him on things that he's good at. He's good at crossing routes and route running. He's a smart football player, and he's dynamic. He can take an RPO. We haven't seen Braden Lindsey get an opportunity on an RPO like Lorenzo got last night.
Correct.
Braden has shown he's not a natural receiver. He's not a great route runner. He doesn't have like great ball skills, but you know what he can do once he gets the ball, he's dynamic. He's proven it. He's got a 70-yard touchdown on a post route, a 61-yard touchdown on a jet sweep, and a 51-yard reverse touchdown against USC. And these aren't against bad teams. Navy was an 11-win team the year that Braden beat him for a post route. He's also caught a look screen against New Mexico and went for a score. They stink. The point being, those are the things Braden does well, and he hasn't given a chance to do those. He did one against USC, he went for 14 yards. They haven't given him a chance to do that a whole lot. That's a coaching problem to which Kenny addressed. But you should be able to use both. And this notion that, well, Lindsey's not doing this, so screw him, let's go with Lorenzo Styles. No good coach in America should have that view. Hey, you know what? Lorenzo's stepping up. Now I really got me some weapons because I got him, Avery, Kevin, Dion, and Braden Lindsey. But it's about building to their skill set.
Right.
And so far this year, they have not played to Braden Lindsey's skill set. Yes, they run deep routes, but everybody in the stadium knows he's going to run deep routes.
Exactly.
Use him on other things, which then makes those other parts of his game more effective. So anyway, that's the key. That's kind of how it is in my opinion. So anyway, that's going to do it for tonight's show. We will be back tomorrow. Vince and I will be back at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon. Great crowd tonight, by the way.
Yeah,
awesome crowd in here. A lot of chat, but a lot of great numbers. Really appreciate y'all being part of what we're doing. tomorrow, 12:30, we will break down Brian Kelly's press conference. We'll do we'll be a little bit more brief on that than we have in the past, unless there's some breaking news. We're going to spend a lot more time talking about this weekend of college football and kind of give a look ahead to the college football playoff rankings, which come out Tuesday night. We will have that show as well. We haven't quite decided yet what we're going to do Tuesday afternoon, but we will do something fun. And of course, then Wednesday we'll start our Navy prep. And we got one last comment, super chat. Thank you. BAO2104, great Irish victory. Thank you for all you guys do. Where do you think the Irish will land Tuesday night in the CFB polls? We will talk more about that tomorrow. I've been asked that a lot today. I think it's going to be 8th or 9th.
I think that's fair. The
reason I think 9th, because they're ahead of Michigan in the polls, because the polls tend to have a much more recency bias than the committee does. The committee, which I love, they say basically every week we start from scratch and look at your resume. I think right now Michigan still has a better resume than Notre Dame. I mean, their loss was on the road to a top 10 team. Notre Dame in a close game that they controlled. Notre Dame's loss was at home by 11 in a game they were only ever close, but for 2 minutes in the third quarter. I also think that Notre Dame's big win is Wisconsin. Michigan's big win is Wisconsin. And I think Michigan has had far more blowout victories where Notre Dame's kind of been just beating everybody. Sort of, So I could see Michigan being ahead of them. I don't know if I'd put Michigan ahead of them. I mean, it's close, but it won't matter
in a few weeks when Ohio State beats the snot out of Michigan.
Well, Michigan still has to play Penn State, and they still have to play Ohio State.
They're going to
right. So Michigan State still has to play Penn State and Ohio State. Ohio State still has to play all of those teams. And
So it's whatever.
And Alabama and Georgia still have to play. I mean, there's still a lot of football left, but this is what I put on the message board tonight, Vince. Look, whether you like it or not, Notre Dame is a playoff contender.
I saw that.
When you start when you're in the first week with 4 games left plus conference championships, you start in the top 10, you're in it. Now, some of y'all may not like that, and I have my reservations too based on how the team is playing right now.
But it's still a fact. Yeah, exactly.
When you start in the top 10 in the first poll,
you're in the conversation.
Especially when you look at how many the schedules that the teams have them play.
Yep. Exactly.
Yep. The one I'm curious about, Vince, I could see them being 10th if they value Wake Forest. That's the big wild card for me because the pollsters don't value Wake Forest, but that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Remember last year they thought BYU was going to be the super highly ranked team because the pollsters had them ranked high, and then the committee had them ranked. Wake Forest doesn't have any big wins, but they have blown out a lot of decent teams, and they're undefeated.
Yeah.
So I'm that's one that I'm curious about. But we'll dive more into that tomorrow and Tuesday. For absolutely, we'll get into that. But thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for all the super chats. Thank you for everybody else for the comments. Drunk Vigo, smash the like button. I think everyone should follow his example. I'm not into the whole follow the leader thing, but in this case, I think he is right on this one, and we should definitely do that. Thank you, Kenny, for the kind words. Vince, thanks for joining me tonight. I know you had a busy night. You had to work at the radio station. You had to take your kids trick-or-treating. You got to go do some other family things.
The sugar high is currently taking place right now.
But Vince still made time for us to do a show tonight. So it's much appreciated, buddy.
Absolutely.
Have a great night, everybody. Enjoy the victory. Navy's coming up, obviously, this week. So, and it's been a fun year of college football. It really has.
It really has. I like the fact that we've been able to watch some games too.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, everybody have a great night. For Vince, I'm Brian. We will talk to you again very, very, very soon.